guys, and welcome back to my channel. The case that I'm going to look into today is the tragic and brutal murders of Stephen and Stoni Blair, who were actually murdered by their own mother, Michelle Blair. And I'd just like to say a disclaimer here: if you are very sensitive to child abuse or child death, then this is not the video for you, because that is what will be featured in this case. Unfortunately, it is a tragic case, and so yeah, if it's not for you, just pick another video, watch something else. This case was suggested by Brittany, so thank you for that. I appreciate any suggestions you guys have, and if you have any more, let me know and I'll look into them for you. Michelle Blair murdered and tortured 2 of her 4 children. In March of 2015 was when the bodies were discovered. It must have been awful, but she'd actually been evicted from her apartment in Detroit due to not paying the bills. So the bailiffs had come round and they were, they evicted her. They're doing the normal, scoping around the apartment, checking things out, as they do, when they make the horrifying discovery: hidden inside a freezer in her living room were the frozen bodies of her 2 children, Stephen and Stoni. Michelle would allegedly abuse her kids. She would burn them with hot irons, she would hit them with wooden planks and extension cords, and I believe it was all of them. So she had 4 kids, and I believe she abused them all. Now, 9-year-old Stephen Berry Jr. was tortured for 2 weeks before he did end up losing his life on the 9th of August in 2012. She had tied a belt around his neck, had thrown him in a tub of boiling hot water, and I mean boiling, and she made him sit in that until his feet blistered, which is beyond horrific. And she would do things like put a plastic bag over his head, things like that. That is how she would torture him over the 2 weeks. She then claimed that she actually found Stephen unresponsive, which is when she decided to wrap his body up in his favourite blanket and put him in the freezer. She claimed that she'd killed him because she discovered that he was molesting her youngest son, which was his youngest brother, who was only 6 years old at the time. She said that she didn't actually intend to kill him, just hurt him, and it was like a punishment. He was molesting her kid, her other son, and his brother, and so her punishment was abusing him to the point it led to his death. Then on the 25th of May in 2013, so kind of almost a year later, she discovers that her 13-year-old daughter, Stoni, was also abusing the same son that Stephen was. She proceeded to starve her for an entire week, serving her only a bowl of oatmeal and water. She then killed 13-year-old Stoni, saying that she got into this physical confrontation with her, which is when she strangled Stoni with a black t-shirt and suffocated her with a black garbage bag. She then went on to force her eldest daughter to put her sister's body into the freezer along with her brother's body that had been already in there for almost 9 months, I believe, at this point. For the next year, the 2 surviving children, 8 and 17, lived in that small apartment with their brother and sister's body in that freezer. Can you imagine living in a house where your siblings, every time they looked at that freezer, they would have known? Okay, maybe the youngest son, he was 6, maybe it didn't really, register as much, but the eldest, she was fully aware. She would look at that freezer and think, my brother and sister are in there. It must have been absolute torture, and she must have been so frightened for her own life, because at the end of the day, if she's murdered 2 of her own kids, what's to say that she isn't going to do the same to her? So she must have been terrified. The bodies were wrapped up in plastic bags, and it literally took 3 days for them to thaw out enough to do an autopsy on. And this is when it actually came out that they were killed years apart from each other. I guess they thought at first that they'd both been murdered and just stored in there, murdered at the same time, but they weren't. They were murdered almost a year apart. Both deaths were ruled homicides. Stoni's death was due to multiple blunt force traumas, and Stephen had died as a result of multiple blunt force trauma injuries and thermal injuries. So the boiling water, it's just awful. I really don't understand how people do these kinds of things, to their own children as well. Again, she was an abusive mother. There were reports that she would starve her children, things like that. But the news to everyone on the outside really shocked them. to her family, to her friends, to anyone that knew her. They always thought that the family was a normal, loving one. And that is because that is how she portrayed it to be. She'd often post pictures on Facebook and write on Facebook saying things like loyal to my babies. She would then post pictures with messages on saying, there's no greater blessing than being a mum, which is just so crazy. How can she write stuff like that and then abuse her kids and murder 2 of them? I don't even know. You may at this point be thinking, how did nobody notice that these 2 kids were gone? Like, nobody sees them for a year and nobody reports it. Nobody reports any abuse or suspicion or anything. Well, her plan was to basically lie and say that she's homeschooling them, so she'd take them out of public school and then said that she was going to homeschool them, which is perfectly legal, and therefore that would sort of negate the teachers worrying as to where they were, why they're missing school, why they're doing this, and then reporting it because they don't know now because they're being homeschooled, which of course they wasn't. They were just being tortured. And at that point, they'd probably already been murdered. I don't know the dates around when she told the school that she was pulling them out and homeschooling them. Whether she'd killed them and then told them that. It's plausible, I don't know. Also, if anyone ever asked about the children, she'd say that they were staying with their auntie or that they preferred staying inside all the time because they didn't really like people. I even read somewhere that she told her kids to say that they had been adopted or something like that. I think that there were 2 fathers involved, so maybe the 4 kids had 2 different fathers, or I'm not sure whether it was just the 2, Stephen and Stoni, whether they just had 2 different dads. I don't know how many dads were involved in this family, but pretty much you think, why aren't the fathers asking where their kids are? When they asked where their children were, she just kind of gave them the same excuse, and they just accepted that. So I don't know how involved they were in their lives, like whether they barely saw them at all, and so when she gave that excuse, they just figured that was normal. Neighbour Jessica Porter, who was 28, said that she'd only seen Stoni through a window and had never ever met the youngest son. So, you know, she'd keep him confined in a house. She wouldn't let him out. He was 6 at the time of this happening, and the neighbour, well, 8 I guess when they were found, and the neighbour never even knew that he existed. So she obviously just kept them inside as much as she could, like locked inside a house. This neighbour, Jessica, really did believe that Michelle loved her kids. She homeschooled them. She would super glue their assignments to the walls in the living room because she was so proud of them, and that is what proud and loving mothers do. It just goes to show that you have no idea what is going on within a home and behind those walls. Like, from the outside looking in, perfect family, perfectly loving family. From the inside, house of horrors, torture, abuse, and murder. It's just insane. The Child Protective Services actually investigated Michelle 2 times for abusing her children. First in September of 2002 and then in February of 2005. And the abuse, by all accounts, I believe was confirmed to be occurring. It's unclear whether any action was ever taken in respect to that, but it was determined that they were allowed to, remain in her custody. When doctors did the exam on the surviving 2 children, they found that they were covered in scars, covered in bruises from the repeated beatings over the years. Which I find really sad because they were aware of the abuse. It was confirmed all those years ago and nothing was ever done about it, and that really makes me mad because these children suffered a lot and 2 of them lost their lives, and that could have maybe been prevented if they had done something. So after she killed her own children, she carried on like normal. She would still even receive welfare benefits for them all. At the time of her arrest, she was actually 35 years old, and she was arraigned on 4 counts of first-degree child abuse, 15-year felony, and 1 count of committing child abuse first degree in the presence of another child, which is a felony punishable by up to life in prison. Her surviving daughter after the ordeal would be seen by counsellors and told them how her mother burned her back with a curling iron. She had this visible cut up against the left eye, which was said to be the result of her mother hitting her in the head with a plank of wood. Her front tooth was chipped where her mother had hit her in the mouth with a curling iron. And Michelle, just refused to get medical treatment for them. I mean, why would she? She's abusing them. She clearly doesn't care about their health and well-being. And if she took them to the hospital, well, guess what? It raises questions and people start asking the questions. And so she wouldn't want that suspicion on her, therefore she didn't take them. Bruises were also noted on her son's back, which were caused by his mother. They found lots of signs of abuse. 25 scars and injuries on her son's back alone, both old and new, as a result of physical abuse by his mother. There was numerous loop-shaped scar injuries all over their body, which they believed was when she hit them with like the electrical cord. She probably kind of bent it over and would hit them with it, therefore the loop. And that was on things like his back, his buttocks, his right hip. They were just in various places throughout his body. Her daughter had also been beaten, again with the same extension cord, being burnt. Even clothing had been burnt onto her, and she had burns like in numerous places on her body. I believe as well that the house that they lived in was a bit of a wreck. Like, the living conditions in it weren't really great, and that, along with the abuse, it was dubbed the House of Horrors. Michelle was charged, convicted, and sentenced in less than 4 months. She pleaded guilty in June to first-degree murder, insisting that she'd take the death penalty if Michigan had it. Judge Diana Hathaway on the case said to her, "You imposed the death penalty on your own children." And she just replied without a literal inch of remorse, "I did." She didn't care. She had no remorse whatsoever during the entire trial. Her 2 surviving children, aged 17 and 8 at the time of like this all happening, were placed with an aunt temporarily. I don't know much about them now. I know that the eldest went to graduate high school and she had plans to attend college. So they're obviously moving on with their life. They're going to be scars. They're going to be mental issues. They're going to have scars everywhere, including mentally. But it's just heartwarming to know that thankfully they are now safe and well. This case is tragic. I don't know how people can abuse their own kids like that, and even then just take their lives, because she said that, which is probably totally made up, that they were abusing their youngest brother. I mean, even if they were, is the result of that killing them? No, the answer to that is never ever killing them. So I don't know. If they were, go and get some help somewhere. But she was just sadistic anyway, because she abused them all the time. It was probably just an excuse she used to justify her murder. But yeah, this case was really awful. There's not much information out on it, so I apologize if it's short or if I've missed anything. I've tried my best to gather everything. It's all kind of trial based and news articles and things like that, so there's not too much information out on it, but it was suggested and every case deserves to be shared. And these poor children, oh, it's just horrific what happened to them. So yeah, but that is the end of the case. If you like this video, give me a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for similar content. Anyway guys, that's all I have today on the case of Stephen and Stoni Blair. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bye.